Okay, welcome. So today I wanted to offer some reflections about the journey of trauma to recovery, or journey from trauma to healing. And I just want to talk a little bit about that, my own experiences, and share some ideas and some examples, especially from the work of Judith Herman. Okay, blessings. Yeah, so some weeks I spend a lot of time preparing my videos, a lot of research, piecing bits and ideas together. Recently I've obviously been reading Prince Harry's book, and at the weekend I watched Prince Harry being interviewed by Dr. Gabor Mate, and that was fascinating, really fascinating. And yeah, I got a lot out of that. I made quite a lot of notes here, and really it's this journey of trauma and healing. And I really see that, say with Prince Harry, there seems to be two camps. You either love him or you hate him. And what I'm trying to do is just be in the middle, go, okay, yes, there's some things people don't agree with, and some people agree with what he does. What I'm trying to find is that middle ground. But as I was listening to him, he was talking about this journey of healing. And reading his book is like, wow, what he'd been through. At age 17 or 18, one of his best friends died in a car accident, on top of his mother dying, on top of all of these other things. So I see that his journey from trauma to healing. And I was, just kind of thinking about this book. I love this book, Trauma and Recovery. It is quite a difficult read because it talks a lot about child abuse, sexual abuse. It's not easy to read, and yet as I read it, I can really go, wow, she talks about captivity. It's like, oh yeah, I recognize that. Boarding school. Or she talks about dissociation. It's like, yeah, I can relate to that. So many of these things, while she doesn't talk about boarding school. But she talks about this idea of trauma and healing. And I see that a lot of my videos are about the psychology, or it's also about boarding school syndrome. But I see my day-to-day work with clients is all about how they heal. That's what I'm interested in. That's been my journey for 25 years. 1997, realizing I was deeply depressed, working in London, studying in London. And it's been this 26-year journey now of how do I really heal? And it's taken me to the monastery where I spent 3.5 years, 3 years as a novice monk. And that's what I'm fascinated by more than anything. How do we heal? How do we go through the most horrific abuse that, Judith Herman talks about, or the stories I hear from my clients, and then recover? And I see it as possible, in my own life. Next week I'm going to be going back down to London to film and share some of my story about being suicidal while working in the city of London and walking along Waterloo Bridge wanting to jump, and eventually a few years later actually getting razor blades and slitting my wrists, beginning to slit. I didn't go all the way to kill myself. So, it's like we can go through these deep, dark states that so many people who reach out to me or who come across this work have gone, how do we heal? And it's like, we can do it. So I wanted to speak a little bit to what Judith Herman talks about of these 3 levels of healing. The first thing she says is safety. That's the first level. I won't go into depth about what she says here, but this idea that we need safety. So for me and my healing journey, although 1997 I began studying self-help books, meditating, getting interested in healing, it was only really 2002 when I arrived in a Buddhist monastery that I felt safe. I felt safe. And at that point, then, it didn't take me long to move into the second stage. In the work I do with others, often the safety is, like being in relationship with a therapist or a coach like myself. So it's like having that safety that I'm not going anywhere. I'm fully here for you. And I see that that is what we need, especially as ex-boarders. The first thing for me, if you've had complex trauma or you've had trauma or you're an ex-boarder, we don't trust others. And therefore we need to feel safe. One of the ways I help my clients to facilitate this is to create a daily practice. And I'll go into more depth because this is such an important part of my life. And it's also an important part of my client's life to really transform is we take those negative behaviors that we learned through our childhood and transform them into a positive routine. So that's the first thing, is safety. The second thing that Judith Herman talks about is remembrance and mourning. So crying, grieving, really. So we have to remember what happened. Now, there's a bit of a catch-22 for a lot of ex-boarders. A lot of ex-boarders, as Nick Duffel says, and this was about a month ago, I did the video about the compliers. As the complier, as the person who just gets by, we see boarding school in a very good light. It's, oh, it was the making of me, because we've disassociated. And therefore, this is quite challenging for us to enter into the remembrance and mourning. Now, I've spoken to a few clients in the last few weeks, and both of them have just finished reading The Making of Them. And as they've read through it, they've changed their perception of boarding school. So this is partly it. To remember the stage 2, it can be helpful to read other people's experiences. The men's circles that I do for ex-boarders, for men, again, we share our stories. So it's remembering. It's a grieving process. And as many therapists talk about this idea that we have to feel the grief in order for us then to move into the joy. What we often do as ex-boarders, we will not grieve. No, there's nothing wrong with me. And therefore we do not feel joy. We are like zombies. That was what I was like. Many of the clients that I kind of worked with at the beginning. So that's the second thing. We really need to remember, mourn. And it is really important to have that safe container. And whether that's a therapist or, one of Nick Duffel's workshops, or you go off, a group therapy or co-counseling, whatever it is, a held space that you can start to remember in a safe space. In this book here, Archetype of Initiation, Robert Moore, he talks about very similar in the archetypal language of people like, I think it's Van Gennep, just find it here, but Joseph Campbell, again, 3, so it's Van Gennep, Turner, Freud, Eliade. They talk about these 3 levels, so it's like Campbell talks about the familiar life, the call. Then it's the stage 2, descent into the zone of magnified power. So it's like we go into this liminal space, sacred time, as Eliade talks about it. And then the third phase is essentially returning with your gift back to society. So you've gone into this, almost like you're here at the hero's journey. You go down into the depth, phase 2, remembrance and mourning. And then the stage 3, and according to Judith Herman, is reconnection with the ordinary life. You take, and as Joseph Campbell talks about, you kind of return with the boon. What's the gift that you've learnt? What have you learnt in that depth? So for me, going into the monastery for those 3 years, it was like I went into such a dark place for so many years. But then I came back with this gift that, wow, meditation, Buddhism, with yoga, with Qigong, Falun Gong, all of these things that I learned, I brought that back into the liminal space, into the profane space, the everyday space. So that is the 3 levels that Judith Herman talks about. They're very similar to the idea of Joseph Campbell. Now, often we can go into this liminal space, into the darkness, into this place of remembrance and mourning, but we can get lost there. And this is why it's really important for us, and what Robert Moore talks about in his book, is we need elders to take us out. That might be the psychotherapist or the coach. It might be the leader of the men's group or the women's group that you're in. Helps you to then come out, bring the gift. What's the gift? You know, I've spoken about this before, about what I call the 3 levels of boarding school trauma healing. And I say the first level is this idea of dissociation. We're, very similar. Oh, it was fine, boarding school. Then we go into the grieving process that I call, I've forgotten it now, but this idea we kind of grieve in that space. It's like, it was terrible. We need to let those tears go. And then we move into acceptance, stage 3. We bring, yeah, there was great gold there. There was a lot of pain, but there was, I learned this, and this. Therefore, it's our shadow and our light are both welcome in stage 3. Whereas in stage 1, our light, I'm okay, our shadow is denied. In stage 2, our shadow, the darkness arises. And then stage 3, they become integrated, which is very similar to what Judith Herman is talking about here. So yeah, just some ideas, and I'm fascinated by this. How do we heal as people who've been through complex trauma or through boarding school syndrome? How can we? And I feel, we can do it. And there are processes and tools, but essentially it comes back to this creating safety. First thing, remembrance, mourning. How did that actually really feel? And if we've dissociated, our work at stage 2 is to feel the body again. What do I feel? Can I feel my tears? Can I feel what it's like to be alive? Both light and dark, joy and sadness. And then stage 3, we bring that gift back. An open heart again. So just some ideas and reflections here. It's probably not as in depth as I usually do, but just to start to awaken, you can heal. I've seen so many dozens of people I've worked with heal, coming out. It's a process of healing. I still have work to do. And yet we can begin the healing journey. We can move back to joy, connect to our emotions again. So just some reflections, and if you have any questions, please do leave them below. Okay, blessings.